Welcome to the HealthiosXchange Strategic Webinar, Enhancing Exposure to Innovation. My name is Scott Jordan. I'm the CEO of S. Jordan Associates, a healthcare consultant specializing in crowdfunding. S. Jordan Associates is a consultant to Healthios, a Chicago-based healthcare investment bank, and the company's crowdfunding platform is HealthiosXchange. Healthios is a revolutionary investment marketplace for the global healthcare industry. Our agenda today, we're going to look at, we'll have 7 different, phases here. Executive summary, we'll talk about the JOBS Act, perfecting the transaction process for strategics, meaning large pharma biotech. Just a short description of who Healthios is. Then we will go into HealthiosXchange, which is Healthios' crowdfunding platform. There'll be some concluding thoughts, and then I want to talk about a value proposition in particular that might be useful to strategics, and then something that's very on the minds of many industry executives, which is public-private partnerships. Healthios seeks to transform the healthcare capital markets. They're trying to do this by economic and regulatory paradigm. The HX will combine revolutionary technology with direct access to the individual healthcare investors worldwide. Keep in mind that HealthiosXchange is a direct investment model. This is different than what we see with the venture capitalist and the 2 and 20 models. And the crowdfunding has been supercharged, as you would say, by the JOBS Act, which is the context line. And the JOBS Act was signed by Obama, still has to be ratified by the FINRA and SEC, but it establishes a new structural paradigm for raising money from accredited investors. And essentially it's a direct listing type of paradigm for emerging growth companies seeking to push their programs to valuable value inflection points. The URL is there in the solution. It's an end-to-end cost-effective, capital-efficient, high-velocity, standardized, transparent, and secure transaction platform. And in the slides at the end of the deck, we'll go through some of the screenshots of the platform itself. There will be a database of 100,000 investors, and there's 4 proprietary portals, CrowdFinance, Foundation Place, Express. Actually, there's 5, but there's 4 that are created today. InMarket, and then eventually LiquidNet, and we'll go through each one of those. We'll also touch on the value void, which is also termed the innovation gap, which is this global healthcare capital flows alters the risk-reward equilibrium and provides transformational investment opportunities. So we'll touch on the value void. And of course, healthcare. Why healthcare? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's a very fast-growing, largest, most dynamic market in the world, and it provides superior investment returns driven by favorable global demographics, etc. The value void, what is it? You heard this, an innovation gap, but it's a series of irrational systematic dysfunctions or gaps in the global healthcare capital flows in which financing requirements and investment returns are misaligned along the development pathway. You'll see here that there's several gaps that we've identified, early stage, and then between angel grants and venture capital, and then of course between venture capital and strategic in the public markets. The JOBS Act, why now? So the JOBS Act essentially is recent legislation. It was introduced last year by President Obama and his administration. And essentially here are the 5 major areas that you should focus on when it comes to the JOBS Act, when it comes to financing private companies via crowdfunding. Number 1. And this is under Title II, which refers to accredited investors, or what many call rich man's crowdfunding, which lists the general solicitation ban. Issuers allowed to generally solicit investors. You don't have to have a pre-existing relationship, so they can leverage the internet to reach these investors. Number 2, raises shareholder limits from 500 to 2,000. This is very important when you're trying to raise money from thousands of crowdfunders that don't want to put a large amount of capital into a company that has odds of 20 to 1 or 30 to 1. They'd rather split their 100,000, 5,000 into 20 companies versus 100,000 into one company. It lessens the restrictions on Reg A. So you can basically raise, this is Title III, from $5 million to $50 million. So small companies can raise more capital without going public. Legalizes crowdfunding on the Title III. Non-accredited investors can invest up. Emerging growth companies can raise up to $1 million. So broader investor base will increase access to capital and financings, and it simplifies online posting and investing. Obviously, many of you are probably familiar with Kickstarter campaigns. Kickstarter, I think, has raised last year nearly $400 million on the reward-based side of the equation. So we look at this from the standpoint that we don't really think that any of the strategics can use the system to actually 100% perfect the transaction process, but that's our goal. And how are we going to assist strategics with perfecting the transaction process? Once again, there's 5 different areas of HealthiosXchange. On the left-hand side is the challenge that many of the big pharma companies have when they're essentially doing search and evaluation, and that is the sheer size of the healthcare industry. $3 trillion, growing at 13%. What does Healthios do? We basically tag companies in the total what they call infosphere, so in 47 medical device categories. We have company selection. That's the second big, that's the second point here, and that is big pharma and biotech. Obviously they want to pick the right companies, and you see that 100% of the investment returns come from 23% of the companies. So there really obviously is a very high failure rate. We have a proprietary scoring platform that will assist evaluation teams with benchmarking companies against their own analyses. Timing. Not all companies are transacting. So on average, a company transacts every 19 months. We have ways, it's like LinkedIn functionality in the site where you can communicate with companies and find out their needs and when they're going to be raising capital or looking for partners or M&A exits. Fourthly, catalyst updates. There's an automatic catalyst updating system on the platform. When a pharma or biotech follows a company, if there is essentially a catalyst, meaning they filed an IND, they hired a new senior executive from, say, Amgen, they went into phase 2, they finished the toxicology study, etc., you get an update in real time of that catalyst. And lastly, we not only focus on online, but we also have a very robust platform for interactions offline, and in this case, partnering conferences. So Healthios has 14 partnering conferences where we assist emerging growth companies and strategics with meeting each other, similar to the Bio Partnering Conference. And our last 2 were at ASCO and at the ADA meeting. Healthios. Who is Healthios? Investment bank focused on private placements, has had a great deal of success, 52 transactions in 17 countries. And Healthios is the sponsor for HealthiosXchange, which is the crowdfunding portal. So let's jump into HealthiosXchange real quick. The mission is to unify the province of medicine with the fortunes of those who invest in it. It's a very robust platform. It's a revolutionary investment marketplace for the global healthcare industry. It has over 9,000 capital sources, institutions, 700 not-for-profits. There will be 100,000 accredited investors in the site. There are 4 portals, think seed to exit, meaning we're following companies from the earliest stages to the latest stages. The CrowdFinance portal, what is the CrowdFinance portal? Well, first of all, it's an ecosystem of investors and strategics, foundations, VCs that interact with learning due diligence, assessing due diligence, and communication. CrowdFinance is essentially a direct investment model for accredited investors that want to invest in the top scoring companies. Foundation plays are foundation-backed companies that are seeking follow-on capital. Ex.PR.E.S.S is fee-free, carry-free means of investors being able to collaborate and invest alongside of top-tier institutions like MPM, Kane and Domain, etc. InMarket is a liquidity portal that essentially assists companies that can't get through the IPO window with doing Form D, direct listing, to go to OTCBB, and ultimately simultaneous uplistings to NASDAQ with pipes. And the funding now, as you can see, each company will have a funding page. They'll have a company page, and then there's a funding page. And on the funding page side, Formula Pharmaceuticals, for example, and I'll show you a company page in a few moments. Formula Pharmaceuticals has they're looking to raise capital for a phase 2 randomized study with the WT1 antigen for refractory AML. They've gotten a commitment from a strategic that if the data is positive, that they will license that product. The problem that Formula has, that like a lot of companies, is they just do not have access to funding, or enough funding in this case. 3 primary value drivers. It's an open access platform, HealthiosXchange, meaning no orphans, no companies left behind. We really feel strongly that crowdfunding alone cannot bring companies to fruition. It's going to take venture capital. It's going to take strategics. It's going to take foundations. It's going to take everybody in concert to get a company to the finish line. There's no adverse selection, meaning we allow all companies into the platform. So it's a lot like AngelList. So it's not like some of the competition which curates deals, and then you wonder what deals that you didn't see. There's a scoring system. So we score companies based on algorithms that have been proven to correlate to outcomes, liquidity outcomes, which is M&A, licensing, and IPOs. It's a fee-free, carry-free model for companies, meaning they don't pay a retainer and they don't have carry. So what's happening today is that the VC model is in disarray, maybe not disarray, but challenged from the standpoint that the 2 and 20 model, as reported in the Kauffman report, which we'll mention later, essentially has shown that the model is not working very well, and that on average a VC fund does not outperform passive ETFs, which is kind of ridiculous if you think about the risk that goes into these venture firms. So there's no premium to just putting your money into a passive ETF. HX is a new approach to healthcare investing. It's the only investment marketplace for the global healthcare industry. The crowd anchors the continuum through crowdfinance through to InMarket. And as we talked about before, there's open access, there's HX scoring, there's a fee-free, carry-free, which is very attractive to family offices, accredited investors that want to participate in the portal. The platform is very robust. There's 5,000 emerging growth companies in the portal, and they're all segmented by market sector or ecosystem, as it says here. There also is the ability to create watch lists so that you can keep apprised of companies that matter to you from a strategic pharma biotech. It's very difficult to keep track of all of the information that you're interested in real time with companies that are on your search and evaluation list. No orphans, we touched on this before. We have a very fully integrated social engine. We use some very robust technologies to attract the investors that it will take to move companies to value inflection points that are important to strategics. Many times that's phase 2 randomized data. Information flows equals capital flow. So we have a very strong research platform where we assist all the constituents, including pharma and biotech, with looking, for example, our capital flows, which show strength in different capital market sectors, such as oncology, cardiovascular, and medical device areas. We also have third-party research on the system itself. Our scoring, we have 104 discrete quantifiable measures. These are variables that correlate to liquidity outcomes. They're statistically correlated. You are alerted if the score changes, which is very favorable. And it's a very data-driven. So this is a real big data exercise. And we rank companies in their their market sectors from top to bottom, just like if you had kids in a race, 1 to 100. And the top quartile at this point are the companies that will be able to fund on the portal itself. One company, one page. Each company that's funding on the site has a very comprehensive platform here. You'll see the things I want to point out here is the HX score up on the right-hand side. You've got the fundraising targets, the deal points, what's the minimum, maximum, the pre-money valuations. You have the opportunity investors, strategics, pharma has the ability to see the highlights of the company, to interact from a Q&A perspective, to assess the science through public documents, and to also get permission layers to see confidential documents. Of course, view videos, etc. I will say at the bottom right, the followers, if you were to follow this company, once again, you would get automatic Catalyst updates on changes in the score or changes in the company profile itself. We also we touched on this also. We've got conferences. You'll see we have 14 a year. We've had over 10,000 attendees to date, and there's just been a lot of positive outcomes from assisting companies with licensing their compounds to pharma biotech players. Some concluding thoughts. Let's talk about Kauffman Study. So the Kauffman Study, why did we launch a crowdfunding platform? Essentially, the Kauffman report was one of our key areas as far as stimulating us to develop a crowdfunding platform. And you'll see some of the recommendations that they have here, and we'll go through these in more detail on a future slide. We basically created our portal to relate directly to these suggestions. So I'll get to that slide in a second. Obviously, we all know that biotech and healthcare and medical device are very, very attractive areas. However, only 10% of investors, accredited investors, there's 6 million of them in this country, have investments in Reg Ds. And the reason for that is they typically do not want to put a lot of money into one company that has a very high, in an industry with a high failure rate. Many of them are in VCs, but those VC funds have been underperforming. Thus, these investors are seeking direct investment models, and they're looking for lower investment thresholds where they can diversify their capital over a number of portfolio companies, which we actually have in our system. When we take a look at the portals themselves, they link directly to the Kauffman conclusions. So if it's, for example, the top is to track record of consistently invest. You want to correlate companies with their public market equivalents, which is what we do with scoring. You want to assist investors with directly investing in a small portfolio of new companies without high fees. That's crowdfinance. Express, co-invest, and later on deals side by side with seasoned investors. InMarket, push companies into the public markets. And lastly, cut the fee structures associated with investing under the current models. What's one of the key value propositions for strategics in pharma is essentially to establish watch lists, very active. I mean, it's almost like Google Alerts on steroids, meaning that you can get line item by line item in the scoring. You can get updates as to when a score changes or when the company posts new documents on the site. We feel this will enhance your exposure to innovation. You'll be able to track the clinical, regulatory, organizational, and strategic progress of your watch list companies. It's a data gateway. You can go in and you can see a lot of research and financing activity. Overall, we think it's a more effective due diligence process. The last thing I want to touch on is public-private partnerships. With the success of Kalydeco and the cystic fibrosis Vertex collaboration, more and more foundations and large pharma biotech are looking to partner on pre and clinical programs. Voluntary healthcare organizations, that's what VHO stands for. But what's happening is they're realizing that they're not the only players in the battle against disease. There's a lot of other entities that can assist and work together to push therapies and medical devices to value inflection points and ultimately liquidity pathways. You'll see an overview here of some leading people in VHOs like Dennis Cha, Katie Hood, for example, Timothy. So you'll see some of the feedback here. And what we think is in the future that the VHOs who are accustomed to working solely with nonprofits will engage directly with the for-profit world, including working with pharma biotech more closely in these private companies as they seek to advance drugs into the clinic. One of the things that's been very, very exciting is to watch the not necessarily the birth, but the progression of venture philanthropy. And essentially this model is essentially that foundations and people who donate capital have dual goals, which one is to make money and the other one is to do social good. So what you're seeing with venture philanthropy and the for-profits, that the VHOs, the voluntary healthcare organizations, are engaging with for-profits. You'll see the significance of that. On the deal structuring side, you'll see that they are starting venture philanthropy. They have this double bottom line. So they are interested in new creative deal structuring. The old model was to basically, pour your money into, academia, academia or to charities, but we all know the challenges associated, even with charities, with seven-figure salaries, and in some cases, upwards of only 10 cents on the dollar going into pre or clinical programs. Partnerships with strategics, right? They want to communicate with pharma and biotech around the fundamentals of what industry partners are looking for in the drug development process. Partnership with capital sources such as venture capital, accredited investors, family offices, corporate VCs, for example. They know that when foundations perform due diligence, and alternatively when you make funding decisions, that venture capitalists take note. And lastly, from a due diligence perspective, we can assist foundations as well as large pharma with benchmarking their due diligence and providing catalyst updates. So this is basically the foundation of this, well, I guess the end result of venture philanthropy and the collaboration of public-private partnerships. And this was a very big success for patients, obviously, with cystic fibrosis. So that concludes our presentation. I will say, if you have a question, please put it into the chat box, and I'll be more than willing to answer that. The other thing is that we'll send out a follow-up email with the presentation deck. We also are open to taking you through the portal itself to show you the features and benefits and show you how strategics can leverage this tool for to assist them with the search and evaluation process. So I'll just wait a few minutes here and see if anybody has a question. And if not, feel free. I can be reached at 847, which this will be in the email, but I can be reached at 847-849-1736. By the way, the commitment of pharma biotech is there's no cost to go into the system. We just ask that they curate their page, meaning that they have an administrator that posts photos and documents, and we will provide you with a list of emerging growth companies and foundations and venture capitalists that come to your page, similar to LinkedIn, which is a nice functionality, unless they're anonymous. And that way you can follow up with the relevant individuals that want to make contact with your company.